We had college football yesterday. Now we have the NFL on Thursday. Is there a better time of year? I don't think so. And for that reason, I'm going to do something we haven't done before. We are going to go 60 players deep with this rankings and tier list video. So we got to be quick. We got to get to this ASAP. But beforehand, we have the biggest announcement we've ever had on this channel. 24-hour live streams happening on Monday. We said we would do it if we hit 90,000 subscribers. I thought there was a 0% chance that was going to happen. But y'all are absolutely absurd. Y'all been dropping likes on every single video, every single live stream, subscribing to the channel like madmen. So we're going to go through. We are going to fire up that 24-hour live stream on Monday. We are going to be drafting on Underdog. We are going to have so many of your favorite analysts lined up to draft with us. So, of course, if you want to draft with myself on any live stream, if you want to draft with your favorite analyst, if you want to draft in a public lobby, if you want to draft with your friends, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. Now, with Underdog, you do not submit your starting lineup. That's automatically done for you at the end of every week with your best starting lineup. And there's no waiver wires because you draft 18 rounds. So this means there's no time commitment at all during this season. That's how I was able to do over 700 drafts on Underdog this offseason. So it's not going to replace the main fantasy football league you care about. It's just some extra fun on the side. And when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You're going to get our 2022 fantasy football rankings. You're going to get our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. And most importantly, for the love of God, you're going to be able to get in some drafts with us on Monday because I really, really need you to. And let's go into this tier list. Nothing else to talk about. JT1, CMC2, Christian McCaffrey, the highest ceiling in fantasy football. Jonathan Taylor, I would argue the highest floor and ceiling combination because with JT, he's missed one game of football over the past 5 years, and that was due to a COVID close contact. I understand injuries are mainly random in fantasy, but when we're looking at two players on the opposite end of the spectrums, I would say that Christian McCaffrey is a little more risky than Jonathan Taylor. I'm still all in on JT at 101. And then dropping down to our second tier, we have moved Cooper Kupp back up to our wide receiver 1 spot, 3 overall. Now, the reasoning behind this is we first moved him behind Justin Jefferson when the report came out about the Matthew Stafford elbow injury, and I was worried. I didn't exactly know what it was. And I was like, okay, well, a lot of smart people are already saying Justin Jefferson should be the wide receiver 1 overall. We'll throw in the towel. We'll use it as a tie break. We'll put Jefferson above Kupp. But now I think that the more you read about this elbow injury with Matthew Stafford, the less concerning it actually is. I mean, Kupp has almost had 2,000 receiving yards. 2,000 receiving yards in a single season last year. He led the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. He has the same quarterback, the same coach. I'm not too worried. We're going to have Kupp at 3, Jefferson at 4. Then we're going to have Jamar Chase 5, Austin Eckler 6. Eckler is moving back down with the addition of Sony Michel, as well as Isaiah Spiller being back at practice and looking like he should be good to go to start the year. We know that historically speaking, Los Angeles doesn't necessarily want to use Eckler as a 3-down, every down player. And instead, they would rather use him for his best skill set, and that is catching the football. But that's going to be a skill set that's very valuable in fantasy football. We still have Dobbins, the running back 3. I just don't necessarily think that he can be up there in tier 1. And now let's move it down to our third tier where we got Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook. Every single one of these players have red flags. I mean, Joe Mixon, some people are concerned he's coming off the field on 3rd downs. Najee Harris, we never saw him break away long runs at Alabama or Pittsburgh. Don't necessarily know what the top end speed is, as well as he has a pretty bad offensive line overall. And we don't know exactly what to expect for the Pittsburgh Steelers without Ben Roethlisberger. With Derrick Henry, he's 28. This is going to be the worst offensive line of his entire NFL career. He doesn't catch passes out of the backfield, and he's coming off an injury. Dalvin Cook here at the last spot. I mean, this is a running back that's 27. He's playing in an offense that's most likely going to run the ball significantly less with the change to Kevin O'Connell. And he's been a running back that's on average missed about 4 to 5 games throughout his entire NFL career. Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, there are very positive cases for every single one of these running backs. Joe Mixon, running back 1 last year with one of the worst offensive lines in football. Now a top 10 unit, finally in a good situation. Najee Harris could possibly lead the NFL in snap rate among all running backs. Derrick Henry was the running back 1 on a points per game basis last year, and Dalvin Cook's been a top 3 guy on a points per game basis over the past 3 seasons. So I think that you have very bullish signals for some of these running backs and very bearish signals. It just comes down to you. You're going to rank these running backs in this tier any way you want. And now dropping down to our next tier, we're going to have Travis Kelce at 11. So we're making these overall rankings for 12-team leagues that start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 flex spots. Now, if you're playing in a league that has fewer flexes and fewer overall starters in general, you move Travis Kelce up because having the elite level tight end is going to give you a positional advantage. Whereas if you're playing in a league where you have more flex spots, then we have to move Travis Kelce down because it's going to be harder to find wide receiver value later. So it does come down to the league that you're playing in. But with Travis Kelce, has been the tight end 1 over the past 3 years on a points per game basis. On top of this, no Tyreek Hill, should be playing in an elite level offense. Fair spot to have him at the 1-2 turn. And we're going to have Stephon Diggs here as well. I mean, with Stephon Diggs, I think that he's going to be in a great situation in Buffalo, given the fact that you have no Emmanuel Sanders, you have no Cole Beasley. Isaiah McKenzie's currently hurt. So yes, maybe when he's going up against Ramsey week 1, Gabriel Davis looks like he is some stud. I'm already mentally preparing myself for that. But I do think this Stephon Diggs could be the wide receiver 1 this year. DeAndre Swift, 13. Aaron Jones, 14. Both running backs with crazy usages in the receiving game. I used to have Aaron Jones ranked before DeAndre Swift, but based on what the coaching staff is saying there, I'm a little bit more concerned about A.J. Dillon having the red zone role. Saquon Barkley, 15. Saquon Barkley may be able to get to a 20% team target share. Like, we don't exactly know what to expect with these receivers in New York. And at the same time, with Saquon Barkley, now he's 2 years removed from the torn ACL. So I don't necessarily think you have to be nearly as concerned with what we saw last year. And then we have Alvin Kamara at 16. If you thought there was a 0% chance that Alvin Kamara was suspended, you could move him up past this. I still think it's in the range of outcomes, so I'm still going to be a little bit pessimistic. You also have Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and Jarvis Landry there. So it's probably the most target competition he's ever seen. Now it's dropping down to, I believe this is our 4th tier here. We're going to have Devontae Adams, 17. I know we're a lot lower on Devontae Adams than consensus. I'm essentially just looking at the Las Vegas Raiders saying, hell, he's going to have significantly more target competition with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow compared to Robert Tonyan and Allen Lazard over the past few years in Green Bay. He's going to have significantly worse quarterback play from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr. I know you're a fan of Derek Carr. I'm a fan of Derek Carr, but he's not Aaron Rodgers. So I'm concerned about the drop-off in efficiency as well as the drop-off in volume for Devontae Adams. He was my 103 last year. Devontae Adams was my most popular round 1 selection last season. I just think it's a much worse situation. And now the best situation you could probably ever find yourself in is if you were an emerging wide receiver in an offense that was going to try to be number 1 in the NFL in pace of play and number 1 in the NFL in passing rate over expectation. That's what you have CeeDee Lamb with right now. Now, there are bullish reports coming out of Dallas about the progression of Michael Gallup. I still think Michael Gallup misses the first few weeks and still think it takes some time for Michael Gallup to reinsert himself into this offense. So for the time being, CeeDee Lamb is a wide receiver that's looking like he's going to step up to be that alpha level player and an offense that just pumps out fantasy points. Then we're going to have Mark Andrews, 19. With Andrews, he was the tight end 1 last year, but I think you do need to be concerned about the overall passing volume regressing with the Baltimore Ravens. If you go back and look at what we had in 2020 as well as 2019, at 20, we are going to have Nick Chubb. I'm finally drafting Nick Chubb. I mean, with Chubb, he's been a first-round pick in fantasy for years now. I thought that was always crazy for a committee running back, even if he was an elite talent behind an elite offensive line. But now we're getting Nick Chubb in like the 3rd round in these underdog drafts. Nick Chubb's even falling to the late 2nd in casual redraft leagues because people finally understand that he's in a committee. He's in the same situation he's been in for years. We've had him ranked at the same spot for years. This is just finally where I think the market's caught up and kind of realized who Nick Chubb is. This is the year to buy into Chubb. And then we're going to have Leonard Fournette, 21. Here with Leonard Fournette, I know he's the running back 6 last year on a points per game basis. I am somewhat concerned about the offensive line turnover in Tampa. I am also concerned about the age. And on top of this, they bring in Rachaad White, the best receiving down running back in this year's NFL draft. Still think he's very good. Still think he's worth the 2nd round selection, but there are serious red flags. And then we're going to have Javonte Williams, 22. With Javonte, he looks like he is going to be in a committee yet again with Melvin Gordon. Now, last year, it was like a 55 split for Melvin Gordon, 45 for Javonte Williams. This year, I think it's a little different. I think Javonte gets about 65% of this backfield. So you can't rank him up there with Najee Harris. Now, I would say if Melvin Gordon wasn't here or if Melvin Gordon were to get hurt, all of a sudden Javonte Williams is a top 5 running back, so still has an incredibly high ceiling. I think you can draft him in the second round. We're going to have Deebo Samuel 23. I know we're going to be a lot lower on Deebo Samuel than a lot of people. I'm very concerned about the transition to Trey Lance. That Trey Lance may not necessarily favor the wide receiver with an extremely low average depth of target, as Deebo Samuel's had the lowest average depth of target among all wide receivers over the past 3 years in San Francisco. Doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for a quarterback that can just rush the ball himself when the pocket collapses, for Deebo Samuel to maintain the same target share. And what it really comes down to is 8 rushing touchdowns. Deebo Samuel is the wide receiver 3 on a points per game basis last year because he had 8 rushing touchdowns. I don't think that's happening again. Now let's drop it down to tier where we're going to have Mike Evans 24. With Mike Evans, you have to have him falling as we are getting more and more positive buzz about Chris Godwin, about Julio Jones. Still, this is going to be very similar to the Dallas Cowboys type situation where we know this team is going to be a top 3 team in pace of play, in passing rate over expectation. It's Mike Evans. He's led the NFL in touchdown rate over the past 2 years playing with Tom Brady. Not too much to discuss. We're going to have Tyreek Hill at 25. Now, with Tyreek, I know people are more excited because obviously we saw the receiving touchdown with Tua Tagovailoa in the preseason, but I still think that this is going to be a very bad situation for him. I'm sorry. I'm a Jalen Waddle believer. Okay, I think that Jalen Waddle, what he did his first season and how he compares to AJ Green, Julio Jones, I think he still has a very large role in this offense. And I think Tua Tagovailoa is going to have a hard time supporting 2 elite level options. So we are going to have Tyreek Hill at the 2-3 turn. And we're going to have Kyle Pitts at 26. With Kyle Pitts, finally we see people coming around on the fact that, hell, he is essentially a wide receiver that you get to play at tight end. If we look at his rookie season historically, it compares to guys like Mike Evans. It compares to someone like Odell Beckham. It compares to some of the elite level wide receivers we have seen over the past 20 years. And you're getting the player at tight end. We don't even know if Drake London's going to be good to go to start the year. Now we're going to have Keenan Allen 27. With Keenan Allen, if you're playing in a half PPR format, non-PPR format, you can slide him down a bit because you're chasing Keenan Allen's overall receptions. The target share he's going to have in Los Angeles. You have seen the air yards per game crater, however, so I am going to be somewhat concerned about the overall touchdown upside Keenan Allen may have in Los Angeles, but he's been a low-end wide receiver 1 over the past 3 years. And then we're going to have T. Higgins, 28. With T. Higgins, this is a wide receiver that should be the 2019 version of Mike Evans, where you have Chris Godwin, aka Jamar Chase this year in Cincinnati, just demolishing and posting a top 3 finish. But T. Higgins himself is still an incredible talent. I think there's going to be enough passing volume to go around in Cincinnati. I'm fine drafting T. Higgins here. And we're going to have A.J. Brown, 29. With A.J. Brown, very gross situation. He's going over to Philadelphia in an offense that wants to be very run heavy. And at the same time, he has significantly more target competition than what he had in Tennessee. In Tennessee, he was going to be going up against Nick Westbrook-Akeen and Austin Hooper. Now he has to go up against Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, 2 players that are extremely talented. I think from a talent perspective, A.J. Brown's probably a top 5, 6 wide receiver in the NFL. I just don't love the situation here in Philadelphia. But we will talk about Jalen Hurts later on. Trust me, I love Jalen Hurts in fantasy. Now we're going to have Josh Allen at 30. With Josh Allen, very unique rushing upside that you're getting with the passing volume you may have in Buffalo. I think you can make the argument that he potentially can break fantasy football if he goes out there and puts up 400 fantasy points, as we've seen before. So it does depend. How do you think your league mates are going to value these quarterbacks? Like, do you think you can just get Trey Lance in the 12th round? And now let's drop it down to another tier where we're going to have James Conner, 31. With James Conner, you should see some serious touchdown regression. Like, trust me, Kyler Murray's going to vulture more rushing touchdowns. You're not going to just have James Conner coming out here and scoring every touchdown once they get inside the 5-yard line. But at the same time, no Chase Edmonds means he's going to have a larger role as a receiver. Still a great offense. I'm fine. James Conner, 31. And we're going to have Travis Etienne, 32. Now with Travis Etienne, it's going to be for a full PPR format. If you're playing in a half PPR, if you're playing in a non-PPR, you're going to have to slide him down because you're essentially making the bet that he is discount DeAndre Swift, discount Aaron Jones, or you're just getting a running back that's going to be soaking up so many targets out of this backfield. And honestly, I think maybe the departure of Laviska Shenault helps him out because we know Laviska was that wide receiver operating a little closer to the line of scrimmage. And then we're going to have DJ Moore, 33. With DJ Moore, I understand, hasn't scored touchdowns over the past 3 years. He's played with, I don't even want to mention the quarterbacks he's played with. They've averaged 6.05 adjusted yards per pass attempt throughout DJ Moore's entire NFL career. Trust me, hook 'em horns, OU sucks. I'm not a Baker Mayfield fan. But I can be objective about this, and I can say, yeah, Baker Mayfield's probably the best quarterback DJ Moore's ever played with. I think the touchdown upside does go up. And now 34. I don't know how this works out. The math doesn't check out. Any smart person on the planet tells you this is not a good idea. I'm going to have Jalen Waddle. This is a bet on talent. This is looking at a wide receiver that goes 6th in the NFL draft. I mean, the Miami Dolphins traded the 13th pick and a future first to go out there and get Jalen Waddle. He comes in, has a rookie season similar to AJ Green, similar to Julio Jones, one of the better rookie seasons we have seen in a very long time. It was overshadowed by Jamar Chase. I know it's a bad situation. You have Tua at quarterback. You have Tyreek Hill there. It's a bet on talent. I don't know how it works out. Most smart people are going to tell you, don't put Jalen Waddle here. And then we are going to have Michael Pittman at 35. I mean, with Michael Pittman, we have him ranked as like wide receiver 14, wide receiver 15. So naturally, we are a little bit lower on Michael Pittman when people are willing to put him as a top 12 option immediately. I think he's a high-end wide receiver too. I still think that this is an Indianapolis Colts offense that wants to run the ball over and over and over again. Yes, it's a quarterback upgrade with Matt Ryan, and that's why I'm not ranking Michael Pittman as the wide receiver 28 from a points per game basis last season. I know he was much higher than that. If you don't look at points per game, you just look at raw points, but points per game is what you should be looking at. We're not ranking him as the wide receiver 28. Instead, we're ranking him as a high-end wide receiver 2. I do think you can be a little bit more excited about him. And then we're going to have Deontay Johnson, 36. With Deontay, I understand George Pickens getting a ton of hype. I know a lot of people are worried about the new quarterbacks here not focusing in so much on Deontay Johnson this year. But at the end of the day, this is a wide receiver that was the wide receiver 7 on a points per game basis last season. And now it's dropping down a tier where we have recently moved up Ezekiel Elliott. The reason we move up Elliott here is not anything due to Zeke himself. I still think that there's some serious red flags and that this is a running back that has had fewer rushing yards per game every season of his NFL career. Since his rookie year, second in the NFL in active touches, only behind Mark Ingram. If you include the playoffs, over 2,000 active career touches. There's some serious red flags, but these other running backs in this tier also have them. I mean, Breece Hall, it was just announced Michael Carter Jr. is the starting running back in New York. You're drafting Breece Hall for the elite level ceiling you may have down the stretch this upcoming season. I think this is a running back that checks every single box that you're looking for. The Jets are bad, but we've seen running backs be able to overcome bad offenses if they can go out there and get every single touch in their backfield, which I think Breece Hall can do in the second half of the season. And then we're going to have Cam Akers, 39. I mean, with Akers here, this is a running back that was dealing with the soft tissue, had been missing some practices a couple weeks ago. Looks like he's good to go week 1. Not necessarily a great matchup. He was a great prospect coming into the NFL. He broke out at the end of his rookie season. He's a first-round pick going into fantasy drafts last year before the torn Achilles. But obviously, the torn Achilles is very concerning, so it's not like you can just throw him back up there in the first round. And then we're going to have Justin Herbert at 40. With Justin Herbert, I mean, we can throw him in with Patrick Mahomes at 41, Lamar Jackson at 42. What I would say is if you're playing in a league where you have more flex spots, if you're playing in a league that has 3 flex spots or 4 flex spots instead of 1 to 2, then all of a sudden the quarterback production on a points per game basis from a percentage standpoint is going to go down for your starting lineup and they're going to be less valuable. But if your league only has 1 flex, oh dear God, grabbing that elite level quarterback is going to give you a significant advantage because even if your league mate has better wide receiver depth than you, it's not going to help them if they can't throw them into those extra flex spots and it's just sitting on their bench. Very similar. I mean, I think this does come down to how many flex spots you have. We're going to have George Kittle and Darren Waller here. I am going to move Darren Waller back before George Kittle. Recently, we made that flip where Kittle was ahead of him. The reason that we did that is we didn't exactly know what was going on in Las Vegas regarding Darren Waller not being at practice. Looks like everything's cleared up. Looks like Darren Waller is good to go. So we will have Waller 43, Kittle 44. I mean, with George Kittle, I am concerned that Trey Lance just isn't going to provide a crap ton of passing volume in San Francisco. And then we're going to have JK Dobbins 45. So we have moved Dobbins down a considerable amount here. And it does pain me. Like, trust me, I've drafted a decent amount of JK Dobbins over the past month. Like the second that Gus Edwards hit the PUP, I was like, okay, well, let's go through. Let's draft a JK Dobbins in the 5th round in every draft we can. But them signing Kenyon Drake's not a great sign. I don't necessarily think Kenyon Drake comes in. He's the starting running back over Jake. We're not worried about that. What I'm worried about is what this indicates for J.K. Dobbins and his health. This coaching staff's looking at J.K. Dobbins on a day-to-day basis, and they're like, yeah, you know what? I don't know how we are going to do this at the beginning of the year. Let's go through. Let's bring in Kenyon Drake. Not a great sign for us. And now let's go over to our next tier where we're going to have Mike Williams, 46. With Mike Williams, if you're playing in a half PPR format or a non-PPR league, slide him up because this is the wide receiver with touchdown upside in Los Angeles. These rankings are for a full PPR league, and in that format in particular, I am somewhat concerned that Mike Williams is going to go back to the role that he had in the second half of last year, or the role that he had in all of 2020, or the role he had in all of 2019, or the role he had in all of 2018, all of 2017. The field stretching wide receiver role here, we had incredibly high average depth of target, creating space underneath for Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler to just create separation, score fantasy points. But if Mike Williams were to be used as that alpha X wide receiver that he was through the first 5 weeks of last year, then all of a sudden, he is a wide receiver that can break fantasy football when he's playing alongside Justin Herbert. And now our next two wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, 47, 48. I mean, it's very funny. If you look at my ranking of Courtland Sutton in underdog drafts, or if you're looking at it in high stakes drafts, like I have not been drafting Sutton at all. When we're drafting on underdog, when we're drafting in high stakes leagues, like Sutton usually goes as like a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no, we have him ranked as the wide receiver 19. We can't take him there. But then you go and look at like Fantasy Pros ADP, like just casual home leagues, and people there have Courtland Sutton ranked as like the wide receiver 23. So I guess maybe I'm known to be the number one Courtland Sutton hater. Maybe it's just among the people drafting in high stakes, whereas in your casual drafts, if you're following these rankings, you can draft Sutton. I'm a lot less concerned about these Denver Broncos wide receivers now that we have the Tim Patrick injury. Greg Dulcich also hitting the IR. I do think that plays a small impact. This should be a much better offense with Russell Wilson. Excited to see this week 1. And now we're going to have Hollywood Brown, 49. Speaking of someone who's going to blow up week 1, Hollywood Brown going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. You possibly have no Rondale Moore, possibly have no Zach Ertz. Obviously, that doesn't matter so much for the entire season. But what I would say is this is a wide receiver that's going to start incredibly hot, and maybe, just maybe, is a sell high candidate through the first month of the year. And now let's go over and look at our last player in this tier, where we're going to have Terry McLaurin. With Terry McLaurin, last year we're saying, oh no, can't draft him. Do not draft Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round. Horrible. I mean, at the same time, it's not like our pick was any better. I was going for Allen Robinson in that round, so that was even worse. But here, I'm actually fine drafting Terry McLaurin this season because his price is a lot cheaper. And at the same time, he is the best quarterback he's ever played with. I know Carson Wentz isn't good, but go look at who Terry McLaurin has played with in his NFL career. And now let's drop it down to our next tier where we're going to have David Montgomery, 51. With David Montgomery, horrendous situation in Chicago. The offensive line's garbage. We don't know if Justin Fields is good. We don't know what to think about this coaching staff. There are no receivers to stretch the field. I don't know what to expect with the Chicago Bears. But we have seen David Montgomery before come out in very bad situations. We go back to 2020 where the Bears weren't great and David Montgomery was the running back 7 on a points per game basis. If you look at Khalil Herbert's role when David Montgomery came back from his injury, he wasn't used at all. Now moving down to our next player, we are going to have A.J. Dillon. We have moved up A.J. Dillon. I mean, the coaching staff looks like they're more likely to use him in the red zone. I am concerned that it's not going to happen, and I am somewhat concerned that A.J. Dillon may end up just being fancy Jamal Williams in that he gets 12, 13 carries on a per-game basis, but they all come inside the 20-yard lines, and carries inside the 20-yard lines don't equal fantasy points. They're the lowest value touches you can have in fantasy. But at the same time, it's in the range of outcomes for Aaron Jones to go down and A.J. Dillon to be a top 3 to 5 running back in football. So it's very hard to go out there and make a stance against A.J. Dillon. I think you have a very wide range of outcomes. And then our next two quarterbacks, we got Jalen Hurts, 53, Kyler Murray, 54. Jalen Hurts, I think he could be the quarterback 1 in fantasy this year. I don't think that he is going to be great from a passing volume standpoint. I don't necessarily think that this team averages 300 passing yards a game. That's not happening. But if Jalen Hurts can go out there and bump it up to maybe 230, 240 passing yards per game, and he can maintain his 50 rushing yards a game mark, like Jalen Hurts has a very high ceiling, best offensive line in football. A.J. Brown coming in. And Devonta Smith going into year 2. Dallas Goedert's very good. Like, it's a good situation here in Philly for Jalen Hurts. And now, 54, you got Kyler Murray. With Kyler, this is going to be a team that could potentially be number 1 in the NFL in pace of play based on what we have seen with Cliff Kingsbury. Just very hard to know exactly what to expect with the weapons early on for Kyler Murray before DeAndre Hopkins comes in. And then our next player, we're going to have Elijah Mitchell, 55. I think you can be a little more excited about Elijah Mitchell now that Trey Sermon is off this roster. Now, I'm not saying Trey Sermon was going to be the starting running back here. Of course, we're never saying that. But you never know what Kyle Shanahan's going to do. And just one less running back in the backfield is probably a good thing. And then we're going to have Chris Godwin at 56. With Chris Godwin, I want to continue to monitor practice reports. I don't know if we're going to be able to play him at the beginning portion of the year. But if Godwin was not coming off a torn ACL that he suffered at the very end of last season, he would be a top 12 receiver. If Chris Godwin was 100% healthy, Chris Godwin would easily be going before Mike Evans in a full PPR format. Because over the past 3 years, he's had a better target share. You have no Antonio Brown. It's just we don't exactly know what to expect and when you can play him coming back from this injury. And we're going to have Michael Thomas, 57. I mean, with Michael Thomas, one of our most drafted players in fantasy. I know a lot of people are concerned about no Drew Brees. We haven't seen this player since 2019 as well. What I'll say is if you're willing to draft Christian McCaffrey as the top 5 pick, when we really haven't seen Christian McCaffrey be healthy since 2019, should probably be fine drafting Michael Thomas in the 5th round. And now our next guy, Allen Robinson, 58. With Allen Robinson, oh dear God, one of the worst seasons you're going to find last year. Like, Quintus Cephas outscored Allen Robinson on the points per game. It was disgusting. Yards per route run, trash. Air yards per game, trash. Fantasy points per game, trash. Target share, trash. Where Darnell Mooney was just fine in this same situation. So I am very worried about Allen Robinson, but at the same time, we said this in a video earlier this week. I know a lot of people were surprised. A lot of people are going to the comment section saying, Mason, that's not true. Don't you say that. But guys, I think it is true. I think Sean McVay knows more about football than me, and he decided to pay Allen Robinson more money than he would have Robert Woods and to ship Robert Woods to Tennessee. So I think it's very hard to fade Allen Robinson this year. And then we're going to have Juju Smith-Schuster, 59, talking about a player that I've lost a lot of money on in years past. With Juju, could potentially be the starting slot wide receiver in Kansas City. I think a lot of those targets close to the line of scrimmage, specifically over the middle of the field, are going to be going to Travis Kelce. But still, Juju looks like he's the favorite to lead all wide receivers in targets per game for Patrick Mahomes. And then our last player here at 60, if you're looking at these rankings and comparing him to casual drafts on Fantasy Pros, he's a draft target. If you're looking at high stakes drafts or underdog fantasy, he's a must avoid. Gabriel Davis, like one of the most polarizing players. I think he truly does have the elite level ceiling. I mean, if he can maintain the efficiency we've seen through the first 2 years of his NFL career, and he just adds on the Emmanuel Sanders target share to what he already had, he's a top 12 wide receiver. Now, I think that it's very hard to say that's guaranteed. I think it's very hard to say he's just guaranteed to maintain that level of efficiency. So on underdog, when he's going at like the beginning of the 4th round, I just haven't been drafting him at all. But if you're drafting like a casual redraft league and get him at the end of the 5th, definitely go for it. Now, I think that's all I got for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you got something from it. But most importantly, I better see you out with that 24-hour live stream on Monday. If you want to draft with us, either in that 24-hour live stream or anytime, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. They'll match first deposit dollar for dollar up to $200. I'll get our 2022 fantasy football rankings. You'll support this channel. But thank you again. I appreciate you and hope you have a great day.